Let's get in the mindset of a PM. The mindset of a PM is being obsessed about your customer and using all of that to work backwards and say, okay, what kind of problem am I solving? And how am I going to solve that in a way that radically helps my customer? I love this visual as an example where a lot of people build products or experiences or do things where they have something in their mind. I want a square, I want a sharp corner here. And if your customer is trying to take this path of least resistance or the smoothest route from point A to point B, that's what they're going to find a way to do, and it may not involve your product. And so if you're building the walkway here, but somebody else is going to build a pathway that's much more natural and better, then they're going to follow that. And when it comes to resumes and LinkedIn profiles and telling your story, I see a lot of people that have tactics that are more aligned with the sharp corner here of trying to force the hiring manager through their process, and it doesn't work. The hiring manager is going to take the path of least resistance, and I'll help you avoid that. Starting with an example, there's a frequent interview question that I see a lot of PMs get asked, which is, tell me about a product that you think is well designed and walk me through why it's a well designed product. It gets at curiosity about being observant, about having a product mindset. The example that I give in interviews is my OGO travel bag. It's not even a software product. It's a bag that I've had for 14 years. It's gone through a lot of mileage and it's been durable. It's still holding up. It has some key features that I like. The first one is the wheels. Instead of small, pretty wheels, has these big rollerblade style wheels. And when I'm running through an airport, taking sharp corners, going through a hotel, going through a city, hopping off curbs, it works very well for me in the life of a traveler, especially a busy one, trying to be on time to important appointments. Next one is pockets. When I go through security as an example, I can dump my phone and my keys and my wallet all in this small pocket at the top that's right there when I need it after security, and I barely have to bend over in order to put it in. It works very well for that moment and that problem, which is dumping stuff out of my pockets before the security line. Next up is handles. It has more handles than any other bag I've ever had. It has a handle on all sides and the top and the front, which means that your bag ends up in these interesting positions in an overhead compartment, in the back of an Uber or a taxi, in your hotel room, etc. And when you're traveling, a lot of times you have a coffee or a cell phone or another bag or something in your hand, and you got one hand. And with this bag, with one hand, you can grab it and go at any point in time, regardless of where it is and how it's situated. And then the design. I find that it's professional, but it sets it apart a little bit so that I'm proud and happy to carry it around, but I always know that it's mine. And then the material. Most bags are either hard shell, where it's going to be a certain size no matter what, but it's easy to pack because it has structure. Or soft shell, like a duffel bag, where it collapses and you can fit it into any compartment depending on how much stuff you've put in it, but it's harder to pack. And this one is hard on the bottom, but then malleable on the top, which means it has some structure, which makes it easy to pack. But if I want to squeeze it into an overhead compartment, it will be form-fitting just enough to get myself into some planes where otherwise I would have to check the bag and then wait at baggage claim, which I hate doing. And so when you put these things together, the idea is that this is a great bag, not because somebody put it on a pedestal and said, how do I make this bag better? It's because somebody followed travelers around and said, what are the problems that travelers face, and how do I solve those problems better, and then integrate it into my product, which is this bag. And I think this is a great way to be in the PM mindset and to think about that, both for how you talk about products in the interview process, but also how you manage the interview process, because in the interview process, your hiring manager is your customer, and you need to think about them and how you're solving for the hiring manager's needs. Resumes. Let's talk about some resume advice. First of all, what is the goal of a resume? The goal is to get the interview. If you think about your resume as a trailer and the interview as the movie has a lot of information and the whole storyline and all of the details and the depth. The point of the trailer is not to get people to understand the whole story. It is not. The point of the trailer is you got 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 2 minutes. And from that, you need to get people to come and watch the movie. And that's your only goal. If they come to watch the movie, then you won. Same thing with a resume. People make this mistake of trying to tell people everything. And that's not the point. The point is spark their interest, separate yourself from the pack. So how do you do that? Number one, let's think about format. You got to keep it simple. I see 2-column fancy formats sometimes. The one column where you have your education, your experience, you've got your job title, you've got your bullets. That's the way to go. Occasionally, I will see ones that have a really nicely designed, visually appealing two-column layout where on the left or the right it will have a column that has certifications or skills or special experiences, and then separately is your experience. I have not met a hiring manager that is not frustrated by this. It frustrates hiring managers for two reasons. One is it's different than all of the other ones. So when I'm reading resumes, think about your hiring manager. What's their process? Just like OGO and the travel bag. My process as a hiring manager is I have 20 minutes and I got 30 resumes to review. And my goal is to whip through those and figure out who I should spend time on and who we should interview and talk to. Tomorrow I have 30 more resumes, so I can't let them back up. I have 30 seconds, 60 seconds. I have to pound through this resume. And so I'm flipping through resumes. I'm scrolling through them, usually in a system. And I want to go top to bottom scroll. I want to know how to figure out how many years of experience you had, where have you worked, what have your job titles been, what have you accomplished, what is your education background, how do you stick out from the crowd, okay, next. And when you're doing that, if you break up the flow and you have to make the hiring job manager's job harder by going through these different columns, you frustrate them. The number one thing you don't want to do is frustrate the hiring manager. Also, to be completely honest, I tend to see it in examples where people have less impressive outcomes and they're trying to use this to highlight something else. But hiring managers are looking for the outcomes. So focus on the outcomes. Bring to life the outcomes that you have and make that message glow, and work on adding new outcomes. But don't add new columns. It just gets in the way. Word count. Run a word count on your resume. I find a lot of people don't know how many words are in their resume. There's a lot of talk about, is it 1 page, is it 2 page? But that's just a proxy for density of how much information is in there versus how much signal is in there. And I generally recommend 500 to 800. It's very rare that I have people on the light side of this. Usually I'm advising people to trim their word count. If you have 900, 1,000 words, the trailer's too long. Nobody watches a 5-minute trailer for a movie. They literally don't. And so you're not going to get the hiring manager to read all of that, which means you're wasting their time and you're losing the message. So you got to make it tighter. Preferably 1 page. I'm not dogmatic about this. As a hiring manager, I'm scrolling through. I think it's sharper if it's 1 page, especially if you have 10 years or less of experience. I don't think it's necessary. It's not a big deal if it's 2 pages, but it is a big deal if it's too much content, too many words, and it's too dense. And then don't list responsibilities. This is about the baseball analogy and wins against replacement. I need to know in 30 resumes, what are the 20 I can filter out immediately because the people just don't have any relevant experience. And then of those 10 that are left, how do I see who stands out? And I'm looking for what did you accomplish and how did you stand out? The classes that you took, the fact that you were present. Everybody that I'm reviewing, I already know if you went to a competitive school or if you worked here or you worked there. I already know where you were. And the classes you took or the certifications you have, if the certifications are something that anybody can get just by paying for it, then that's not interesting because it doesn't differentiate you. When I'm looking at the 5 or 10 resumes that are left, they all have those things. And so the only thing I care about is how do you stand out from everybody else? Focus on outcomes. Action words and outcomes. And this is, I designed, I built, I launched, I grew, I improved. And then the outcome associated with that. It's not, I was responsible for A, B, and C. It's, I improved the business in the following 3 ways. List things that separate you. Anything that you have that lets you stand out from the pack. And continually seek these because that is attractive. Be succinct. 1 bullet equals 1 message. And when you think about how to craft your messages, I recommend that you write 3 sentences. The first is your passion. What are you excited about? The second is your proof. What have you done that shows that you're effective at that? And the third is your destination. Where are you going? So for me, my passion is empowering up-and-coming PMs and tech leaders to get the most out of their careers and out of their teams. And my proof is that I'm a 2-time founder for companies that have been acquired, and I've been a head of product at growth stage companies that have been acquired for billions of dollars. And from a teaching perspective, I teach online through Cornell and on my own, and have had over 4,000 students around the globe take my courses and have positive reviews. And so that's about my passion. It's about the proof, and it's about where I am and where I'm going. And this is me almost 20 years into my career. So when you think about you, just what's your passion, what's your proof, and what's your destination? And be really clear about those. And it's okay if it's aspirational. but craft it that way. And then think, okay, particularly around the proof, how do I make sure that every bullet in my resume has one message to it? And back to those functional skills. Let's say that you have work experience and you want to show that you led a team and met a deadline, or you designed something, or you did something that was data and engineering related, or you helped close sales and you understand customers, or you worked on marketing and storytelling, or you understand financial principles and how it really drives business outcomes. Those are the types of messages that you want to craft, and every bullet should tell one message. But when you have work experience, don't tell the same message 3 times, because if you met a deadline, only do that once. One about meta deadline, one about designing, one about engineering, one about marketing, whatever the messages are, one bullet, one message, and don't repeat the messages. I see a lot of times people write 12 bullets. When I'm reviewing resumes, if I see 12 bullets on a job title, I won't read anything else in the resume. I'll throw it out immediately. I have an absolute hard line, because part of your job as a PM is to be succinct and to prioritize. And if you can't have less than, let's say, 8 bullets, then you're not being succinct, you're not prioritizing. This is one of the most important documents in your life. If you can't be succinct there, I can't trust you in the job to be succinct on documentation you'll have to create every single week. And so be concise. I recommend 3 to 8 bullets, let's call it. You get to 10, you get to 12. 10 is really heavy. I don't think you're doing a good job. 12, I'm a hard no, regardless of what else is on the resume. And so think about that. Reinforce those 3 sentences, and then literally delete everything else. If it's not driving those 3 sentences home, the classes that you took, etc., it's not a part of the key message. This is the trailer. Your goal is to get the hook. If you can get the hook in 26 seconds, then don't make a 2-minute trailer, make a 26-second trailer. And spark interest. Be a human that somebody wants to talk to. I know you have something interesting. It may even be quirky. The more specific, the better. A lot of people write at the bottom of the resume that they enjoy cooking and traveling and reading and things like this. And I see it so much. Literally everybody has it. And so it's not interesting. It's not different. At the bottom of my resume, I put drove across the country 6 times in a pickup truck and enjoy gourmet barbecue. Now, that as a trailer, I've gotten more people that have talked to me and asked questions about that during the interview, or that clearly was one of the reasons they wanted to talk to me, than any other bullet on my resume. And maybe that's just silly and that's just me, but that's a way of sparking interest. And so spark interest. And the generic ones don't spark interest. Really specific about backpacking through Europe, or about doing this or about doing that. The more specific, the better, because it makes it more interesting. And interviewing and hiring can be really boring and repetitive. And so just being somebody that's fun to interact with because you have some story that's unique that the other people don't, that's really attractive to a hiring manager because it makes their job more fun. So think about that. Now let's talk about LinkedIn. A lot of what we talked about in resumes translates over to LinkedIn in terms of how you're crafting your story and your message, but there are some things that are nuanced here and very specific that you should work on. So popping up some of my LinkedIn tips and tricks here. The first one, what are your goals? So there are 2 goals. One is to be found, which means that you're passing people's filters and automatic algorithms that match you with things, which is different than a resume review. And then the second one is you want to look impressive at first glance. People look at the profile and do they say, oh, wow, this person's impressive? Because that's the question that they're asking. And how do we go about that? One is you got to have a photo. So it's not important how you look in the photo in terms of, who you are as a person. What's important is that you just generally look professional. And when I was working at LinkedIn, there was really compelling research that if you had a photo, you were 6 times more likely to get called by a recruiter. Not 6%, not 60%, not 100%, 600% more likely to get a call from a recruiter. And it didn't matter the flavor of your photo. It just mattered that you had a photo and that it was relatively professional. So get a professional photo, put it on there. And as part of that, also check your permissions. Now, on the internet, everybody has different boundaries about, safety and having their information about themselves or their family out there. I have a family. I am in tune with this and sensitive to particular things. But if you're looking for a job, I'll just say this strictly on the business side. You need to make your own decisions about safety and privacy. But strictly on the business side, you want your permissions set so that anybody can see your photo, even if they're not in your network. And so go to your privacy settings and look, and there'll be different settings about how much of your profile is available. You want your profile to be widely available so anybody can see it, and you want your photo to be available and your full last name. because that makes you most findable by people that aren't in your network. And your job, if you're looking for a new role and a PM role, is to be findable. And so having your photo and having your permissions open makes you more findable. Craft a strong headline. Think about who you are and what you're accomplishing. The headline on LinkedIn is important. And then prioritize your sequence. You can adjust your experience and your education within experience if you have multiple things that you're doing, if you're advising and you have a full-time job, or if you have a part-time side hustle that you're putting in there as a company or this or that, then sequence it accordingly because you can drag and drop and create the order that you want. There is a below the fold nature, which means that below the fold generally refers to, in ancient history, a newspaper. When somebody would open the newspaper, where the front page folded, everything above the fold gets the most attention by a lot. And you don't want to be below the fold, you want to be above the fold. In LinkedIn and in internet stuff, it's when you scroll, everything you can see before you scroll. But LinkedIn has implemented a new feature recently where it only shows your most recent 5 experiences. And then you have to click read more. And that's a below the fold action that they've inserted here. And so you really have to think about what those top 5 are, if there's any ordering that you have control over. You don't want to reorder them if it's not chronological. But if you have multiple things that you've worked on, think about the ones that you want to highlight. And then share your best work. One of the hardest things about judging PMs is it's hard to judge whether or not somebody's good at this job until they do this job, and how they think. And how they think is about depth and level of detail that a lot of times you only see on the job. If you did an amazing presentation at your job or at your school, then you should think about publishing that. And you want to be careful about sharing sensitive information or anything proprietary. But a lot of times, most of the time, I find that you could abstract this in a way where it brings attention to you and it brings attention to the company. And so when you generate activity on LinkedIn, look at the hiring managers. Find out who a hiring manager is that's hiring for a job and look at their LinkedIn profile. And maybe they're posting activity. And when you're posting activity, you could also go and you could comment on some of their activity. And now they've seen your face. And even if it's subconscious, when they go and they look at your resume like, oh, I think I remember this person in some way. And maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. But if you interact and you engage with people, that's when you're going to generally start generating this momentum so that you can get in the door and you can be a recognized factor once you're there. But share your best work. This is really critical and not as hard as you think. Really interesting tactic, keywords. I'm going to use Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn and created it and obviously does very well on the platform. And when you look at his profile, this is his profile here at the top level, and then you look at the about section. And in his about, the first one's a paragraph, and that's for humans. And then the second one is a list of specialties, and that is for algorithms and robots, because on LinkedIn, everybody's looking for keywords. And you don't want to stuff keywords in a paragraph where it's not natural because it's annoying to read and it gets in the way. But when you have this comma-separated list of specialties, I do this on my profile as well, great artists steal, line from Steve Jobs. Look at people who do things really well and copy from them. So take Reid Hoffman's, copy that specialties, and put all your keywords in there. Because humans are going to look at that and then just scroll by. They're not really bothered by it, but they don't read it. But that's not the point, because it's there so that the algorithms can find it so you can be found on LinkedIn. Your goal on LinkedIn is to be found. So share great work and stuff it with keywords in just the right way. I recommend this approach. And also, we've talked about this being a race, but not being able to see your competition. On LinkedIn, you can see your competition. The way you do it is you go to a hiring manager and you look at their profile and you rewind to their previous role, or you rewind until they didn't have that PM job at that company, and wherever they are on their LinkedIn profile, usually 2-3 years ago, that is who that company hired at the time to be a PM and then grow into the hiring manager. And so look at them before they were the hiring manager, before they were the PM on their LinkedIn profile. That's your competition. That's who you're up against today. It's not them today, but it's them X years ago before they had this role. And that's how you can say, okay, well, what did they do well that looks like it might have positioned them? And how do I differentiate myself? Final aspect here when you're telling your story is an elevator pitch. I have a lot of moments in my interviewing history where I've asked somebody to tell me a little bit about themselves and they talk for 5 or 10 minutes and it's terrible. And they blew the whole interview right there. It's literally over because, again, they can't be succinct and they can't prioritize. And you need to practice this. Have a 30-second version of your elevator pitch and have a 2-minute version of your elevator pitch, and be able to use either one on demand. There are a lot of things that I think you should do off the cuff. There are a few that you should rehearse. When you're making a presentation, I highly recommend rehearsing the opening and the closing. Everything in the middle, just know your content and know your points, make them succinctly. But know word for word how you open, because that matters, and how you close, because that's how people are going to feel after. They're going to remember how you made them feel when you started and when you finished. Same thing with an interview. When you start the interview and they ask about your elevator pitch, or you just meet somebody and they ask, oh, okay, what are you working on? 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. If they actually get engaged and say, oh, can you say that again? Tell me more. Then you have a 2-minute version. And in this, have your passion, have your proof points, have where you're going. We talked about this: passion, proof, and destination. And then rehearse it and rehearse it and rehearse it. When Steve Jobs used to do keynotes and introduce a new iPhone or an iPad or these big products, he would spend an entire day the day before practicing his presentation. I watched Jeff Weiner, who was the CEO of LinkedIn. Excellent public speaker, very eloquent, very succinct, and it came across as if it was just off the tongue and natural and casual. But he spent so much time practicing his biggest presentations, and he specifically practiced it so it could look casual and off the tongue and natural, but it was rehearsed. It wasn't by accident. The same thing with this. Rehearse it, rehearse it, rehearse it. You're in the shower, you're walking down the street, think it to yourself. Just take these little moments to walk through it and really find the words that you want to avoid, the words that you want to focus on, and how you pull it together to send your message.